All right, I got Chris Burres on the show today. He's the founder and chief scientist officer at MyVital C, where he manufactures a Nobel Prize-winning molecule that's responsible for the single longest longevity experiment result in history, a full 90% extension in life. I know it sounds too good to be true, but we're going to get into that. He's also an author, host of the Uncovering the Secrets to Longevity Health Summit, podcast host, patent holder, and master comedy improv, which I'm hoping we can get into that today. Chris, welcome to the show, brother.
Joel, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. And you know what? It's reasonably likely that if we don't talk about comedy improv now, then we might not get to it, right? I'll just share. I was on stage, professional improv artist for 5 years. That was a fantastic part of my life. That theater is closed. Hopefully it wasn't because of me, because I feel like I did a good job while I was there. And I think if you ever, you're a podcaster, right? If somebody wants to be a podcaster, if they want to be on stage, if they just want to have a better presence, they should probably, I would highly recommend going and taking comedy improv classes, because if nothing else, it forces you to think about how you speak. And anytime you're thinking about how you speak, you're going to speak better. And the base phrase, a lot of people are familiar. A lot of people are familiar with this. Yes and is the focus of comedy improv, right? So whatever you say, you yes and that can be hard, right? Like you can imagine, hey, how does this apply to business? I just had this employee come up and approach me and give me the worst imaginable idea of a marketing strategy. How do I say yes and you say yes and here's things that we need to adjust to this strategy. It can be done, because if you say but it actually stops everything. So it's really powerful to switch to this yes and mindset. And anyway, at least we talked about it a little bit. You know what's funny is I'll tell some people that I'm in comedy improv, and they'll say, "Great, say something funny." It's like, that's not how it works, right? I'm on stage with another actor. We have some rules for a game, and then the audience gives us a location and a relationship, and then we go. And so it's a fantastic thing. It was such a mental break for me. At the end of a tough week, I could go on stage and forget about everything, and it was amazing.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I think being a public speaker is you have to be very talented. But I think comedy is that on steroids. Like to be able to act and be funny in the moment, man. I mean, talk about like that is the biggest. Forget Toastmasters. Like if you want to be good at speaking, go do comedy improv. It reminds me too, I'm sure, having that in your background, people, it's like, yeah, tell me something funny. It reminds me, I think there was a movie or some TV show where the guy goes, oh, you do karate? He goes, you think you can beat me up? And, it's that kind of like,
Yeah.
That's what you got, But talk to me, Chris. I'm curious, like, again, here you are having this, amazing background. We were talking before the show. You said, Joel, I don't even know how I got here. Like, I shouldn't even be doing this. But to be working with this Nobel Prize-winning molecule and to have furthered it to its infancy, because I think, and you're going to talk about the history of this molecule that we're being very coy about, but a lot of people like understood it, I think in the 1960s, but then nothing was done with it. Like very often we see some of these things. What was your journey into this health space to where we are now?
Yeah. So, and I have all of this written down. You mentioned author, live longer and better. I've got all of this amazing story. I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, and the reasons behind that involve a Lamborghini and are in the book. So I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. And when I got to college, what does an entrepreneur study? Like, I don't know, like at the time, there weren't any entrepreneurial courses. And honestly, I'm not sure that's the path I would take today. I'm not sure that's what I would recommend. My thought process was, I'm good at math. I'm good in science. What's the fastest way to the highest salary so I can have money to invest in a business? And so I ended up studying mechanical engineering.
I thought you were going to say big pharma. Okay.
Big pharma.
You threw me off.
Yeah. Yeah, that might have been actually faster. But think about this. I'm good in math and science. I am an abnormal engineer in that I'm a good communicator, right? But I probably hadn't honed that when I was going into college. And so to think about pharmaceutical sales, I think that, that's may have been what you were thinking. Like, that's a fast path to a much higher salary, actually. But it takes communication skills that at a minimum, I didn't have the confidence that I had at that time. I mean, life's been an amazing journey. But so here I am. I'm studying mechanical engineering. My goal is to get out of school, make a lot of money, and then invest in a business. And that all fell apart because I ended up starting a business while I was still in college. My business partner, and we've been business partners now for 34 years. It's kind of crazy.
That's amazing.
He was working at the Texas Center for Superconductivity. So that's an organization housed inside the University of Houston campus. That's where we went. Go Cougs. And so it's housed in there. And he was working with this Professor Paul Chu. Now, Dr. Paul Chu is very famous in the superconductivity world. In fact, on the U of H campus, we called the building Chu's Castle because it was built on Dr. Paul Chu's fame. And he was separating this molecule. We'll be coy for a little bit more. He was separating this amazing molecule. And one day, Dr. Chu came in and said, hey, you guys are young kids. This molecule is selling for $6,000 a gram. Yeah, you should go start a business. And my business partner, Robert, is from an entrepreneurial background. I always kind of describe his back of the napkin calculation that looked like $6,000 a gram. That's all you needed to know. And he was off and running.
Fentanyl, right? Yeah.
He was off and running. He had another business partner, and they brought me in as a mechanical engineer to do the drawings to build the equipment to manufacture it and to help with the design. The other business partner, still a good friend of ours today, still very successful, but he decided to do fun things in college while Robert and I decided to build this business. And so in 1991, we started manufacturing this molecule. Enough of the coyness. The molecule that we're talking about, I'm actually holding up a model of the molecule right now. If you're listening, imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. The molecule was discovered in 1985 at Rice University, so here in Houston where we're based. And the three scientists who discovered the molecule won the Nobel Prize in 1996, so a short 11 years from discovery to being awarded the Nobel Prize. And if you're doing the math, we actually started manufacturing and selling this molecule 5 years before they won the Nobel Prize. It is not braggadocious to think, at least to think, that because we were delivering commercial quantities of this material to research institutions around the world, they knew how powerful the molecule is. They knew how amazing it was in so many different applications. And so we probably had some impact on them winning the Nobel Prize, which is pretty amazing. Wow. Just a geeky kind of viral share. In 1991, that's the year we first opened the company, all 10 of the 10 most referenced scientific papers were about this molecule or one of its sister molecules, right? So we call this molecule ESS60. So think about that. You know, every paper, scientific paper references other papers, and they kind of catalog this. All 10 of the 10 most referenced papers in 1991 were about this discovery, right? So that's a viral, a scientific viral discovery kind of before viral even meant what it means today, right? It's like just a massive change. Now, why did they win the Nobel Prize? The molecule is amazing. It performs as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. It makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And this is where people get nervous often because we're on a kind of a health show and nobody woke up today and looked at their car and said, I wonder what in my battery should I be consuming on a daily basis? What biohack exists inside of my car battery? And actually the story gets a little worse first. So one of the shapes on the exterior of this ESS60 molecule is reminiscent of benzene. It has the same shape as benzene. Now, benzene is a ubiquitous molecule. We do not have a modern society without this molecule. In fact, if you just look around wherever you're at and imagine all the plastics disappearing, the benzene ring is the foundation of plastics. It's the foundation of a lot of medicines, including aspirin. It's the foundation of we don't have modern society without the benzene ring. But when it's by itself, it's known to be toxic and known to be a carcinogen. And since there are so many of them on the exterior of this soccer ball shaped ESS60 molecule, they assumed the molecule would be toxic. They put it in a toxicity study. This is where the story kind of turns around. And instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave it to, in this case, it was Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. And I'm very proud to say that our lab provided the material to that study. And our lab is actually mentioned in that peer-reviewed published research. And you can imagine that kind of changed my trajectory from being a happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientist into being getting into the health space. Now, it still took a lot longer, but I've been talking along. I will share this last thing. Our most consistent testimonial is people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. And I'll turn it over to you. I've got more to share in terms of like how we still tried not to get into this industry, but I've covered a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, talk about a little bit of the history there. Thank you. Now I'm curious. This molecule that we're talking about, right? And I think it was Buckminster Fuller, right? Is that the atom that we're talking about?
Yeah.
Why is this so unique in the sense, and how does it, I guess, work in the body that we can make and say, hey, this is probably one of the best. If you're going to pick one supplement out there, this is probably the best one for longevity and anti-aging. There's all these other ones, NMN and stem cell. We can do all kind on the list, and I'm curious to hear your opinion about some of those other ones. But it sounds like if you could just take one, this would be the one.
Well, so I'll share this, right? Because I believe in 100% transparency. There are molecules that have more research on them, right? Like NMN has more research. The quantity of research is significantly higher. We're actually a company that continues to research. You guys may understand. Well, let me tell this. Like, how do we kind of get into the supplement industry, and then I'll come back to like how this might be working. So in 2012, this study comes out, right? The rats live 90% longer. In mid-2013, we started getting phone calls from this really, really crazy, wacky group of people called biohackers. and I can
I've heard about these people.
Yeah, they're crazy. They're crazy. Yeah. And I can say that comfortably because I am now a biohacker. And they started calling us and saying, hey, how much of this stuff that extended the life of rats should I be taking on a daily basis? But what my business partner and I heard was, hey, how much of that stuff that you sell to research institutions around the world to put into inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much of that should I consume? And our first response was zero. We actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid-2013, right? So think from 1991 all the way to mid-2013, we don't have not for human consumption on our labeling because it wasn't on anybody's radar. And we add it in mid-2013. To be clear, the data was clear that the molecule was safe, right? If you process it properly, in fact, in this case, in this particular study, it's a 90% extension of life. We're just ultra conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists, and we just weren't comfortable selling something that goes into inks, batteries, tires, and photocells for consumption. So we add not for human consumption to our labeling. We're getting 2 to 3 calls per week, and the calls go like this. Hey, my knee pain is gone. And we're like, hey, you mean the knee pain of your rat? Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And they're like, yeah, my rat. So if my rat weighs 275 pounds and does HIIT training on Tuesdays and Thursdays, how much should my rat be taking? So we know what's going on. Still really hadn't gotten to a comfort level. My business partner, Robert, and I are getting together like every quarter and saying, hey, do we want to get into the supplement space? And really the contrast between, delivering materials to research scientists and then selling a supplement, I think we can fairly say the supplement industry is a challenged industry. And so we just continually said every quarter, no, we don't want to get into this industry. And we're still getting these 2 to 3 calls a week. I actually found in the middle of all of that a peer-reviewed published research paper that said 50% of the supplements that are on the market do not have in them what they say they have in them, right? So this is, again, the opposite of delivering a black powder to a researcher. He gives it to a grad student or a research associate, and they put it in an HPLC machine and make sure we shipped them what we sold them, right? That's not how the supplement industry works. Finally, in 2017, a guy with a big YouTube following started sharing all the benefits he was getting taking the product on a daily basis. And our phone went from ringing 2 to 3 times a week to ringing 10 times a day. So now this is a bigger opportunity than we thought. We looked back on that paper and thought, this is going to happen in this space, right? Like as this molecule is coming and people are saying, hey, we want to take it, and the crowd of biohackers is growing and infecting normal people, right? So that they're interested in taking it. We knew that there were going to be companies that would come in and just do a horrible job. We also knew that we were in a unique position, having worked with the molecule the longest, honestly, of anybody on the planet, and having provided the material in that original study, and being named in that original peer-reviewed published research. And we have the lab, we've got the HPLC, we've got all the equipment. We kind of figured we probably need to get into this, and we decided to ask ourselves two questions. The first question is a moral question. Are we comfortable selling this? I take it. My wife takes it. Everybody on our team here takes it. By the way, it's not a requirement to work on our team to take it. They just have access to the research and the testimonials, and so everybody here takes it. So that's a big check mark. And then the next is the legal, right? You've got the FDA and the FTC, and you got to cross T's, you got to dot I's. We're doing that. And so it was the beginning of 2018 that we really started bringing this product to market. And one of my goals, because I'll get to your question now, one of my responsibilities was like, okay, let's figure out this science. Like, let's figure out what's going on. Is a 90% extension of life even a big deal, right? Like that's the first thing. And then what might the mechanisms of action be? So first off, no surprise here, a 90% extension of life is a really big deal. The next best way to live longer is calorie restriction, right? If you reduce your calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. I've never tried it, but I think if you go out with a clipboard, nobody's signing up.
No,
look, it comes with a free sweater.
That book that you're going to write is not going to do too well, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, not like your Live Longer book. Yeah.
So, look, it comes with a free sweater because you're going to be cold. No, nobody signs up for that. And that's only a 30% extension of life, right? We're talking about a 90% extension of life in Wistar rats. And so, again, the longest in mammals in history. So it's a big deal. And then next are mechanisms of action. I mentioned that our most consistent testimonial involves sleep. The reality is, like, you do coaching, have done coaching, continue to guide people. Sleep is paramount, right? Like, it's good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. If all we did was improve sleep, right? If that's the only thing we did, then we would have amazing testimonials because we're improving mental, physical, and emotional well-being. But I decided to take it a little bit farther, and I said, okay, well, these rats live 90% longer. What does the medical community think about aging, right? And they tend to, not everyone, but they tend to throw it into an oxidation and an inflammation process, right? And we can check both of those boxes. First, in terms of an antioxidant, there's an ad hoc study out on the web showing us to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. And then there's peer-reviewed published research showing us to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So absolute check there, and we're end up coming back to antioxidant on our most recent theory. And then inflammation. You have to be really careful with inflammation because the FDA has equated discussions about inflammation with the diseases of inflammation, which are also the diseases of aging, right? So arthritis, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, cancers. So if we say we address inflammation, the FDA hears we cure cancer. And that is not a statement that, there's so much more research that would need to be done to even go down that path. And by the way, we're not currently pursuing that one. We're pursuing a lot of other stuff that are kind of tertiary related. What the FDA does allow us to say is that we address inflammation due to exercise, right? So we've all had a tough workout, maybe just walked longer one day than normal and felt that inflammation in our bodies. And we are allowed to say that we address that type of inflammation. Now I'm going to pull one more kind of our current theory ties back into inflammation, and then I'll share an amazing kind of result from a physician that I got to meet who actually came by our booth a second time. I don't know what a booth is, but he came by our booth a second time, and I'll share that story here in a sec. Our current theory is called the BOSS theory, buffering oxidative stress system. Right. So we know from peer-reviewed published research that this ESS60 molecule gets into the mitochondria. Right. And we know from way back in the 90s when it was discovered, it can actually hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of this cage. Right. So here's how this works. I'm going to kind of do a technical description, and then I'll do a kind of fun analogy. Mitochondria, powerhouse of every cell. There's between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body, except for your blood cells, which have 0, and your brain and neurons, which have 2 million. That's how much energy our nervous system uses relative to the other systems in our body. Mitochondria, when it's managed well, right, when it's not stressed, produces reactive oxygen species. This is the negative byproduct, just like any sort of power source. Imagine your car going down the road, you've got exhaust. Imagine a power plant, you've got smoke coming out of the power plant. So you always have a negative byproduct. It's reactive oxygen species. Internal to the mitochondria, you have 2 key antioxidants, glutathione and melatonin, right? Melatonin, I love this, the sleep hormone. Our most consistent testimonial is sleep. So the really nice parallels here. When mitochondria gets stressed, right? This can be from a tough workout. It can be from smog, sun exposure, EMF exposure, a stressful email. It starts producing more reactive oxygen species than the glutathione and melatonin can manage. And that's when they run around and do damage. I kind of picture loose reactive oxygen species like little bumper cars running around and rusting everything that they slam into. That's that oxidative stress that we're trying to avoid. This is where the ESS60 molecule comes in, right? So that stressed mitochondria produces extra reactive oxygen species. This ESS60 molecule can hold on to those, up to 6 of those reactive oxygen species, because they're negatively charged particles. And then when that mitochondria can replenish the glutathione or melatonin, then it can manage those reactive oxygen species appropriately. Here's my fun analogy. Like all biological analogies that are fun, it starts with Mardi Gras. It's the end of Mardi Gras. You're on Bourbon Street. You've got these drunk reactive oxygen species running around, smashing up cars, smashing windows. And you've got the New Orleans Police Department, the glutathione and the melatonin, coming in and handcuffing them to these reactive oxygen species and getting them off of Bourbon Street. But what does the New Orleans Police Department do when they get overwhelmed? They actually stick those reactive oxygen species in a paddy wagon, right? So now they can't do any damage. And then when they replenish the glutathione and melatonin, they can then handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. And that's why we say that this ESS60 molecule is the boss of buffering oxidative stress system.
So in that analogy, Chris, too, is when you have that ES60 molecule, is it able to then, is the analogy, would it be correct to say that it can get the intruders out and then more police can come in, the glutathione melatonin can then come in and like replenish quicker and faster, so we can keep flushing out that waste or keep flushing out that reactive oxygen species? Or is it more, not that we're getting more forces, we're just ushering them out quicker, we're just getting them out?
Yeah, I think I've got a good example that I think will tie that together. So we've got a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion, Anthony Kunkel. He won a U.S. championship at 50 miles and a U.S. championship at 50K, which is 62 miles. And so this guy is stressing his mitochondria, and I'll share the story and then I'll come back to your answer. My first call with Anthony, he said, listen, I was taking 1 serving of your product. I didn't really notice anything. And like all amazing biohackers, I tripled it. So I started tripling your dose.
always smart. Always a good thing
right,
to do.
Which is not always smart. Like, you know that. I know you're being facetious. There are some situations, rapamycin, please don't triple that. Like, that's not a good plan. Like, there are things that you need to know better. But in his case, he tripled it. And he said in our first conversation, he was like, I was blown away, right? I believe that your product could be the difference between somebody having a running hobby and a running career. And the way he described it is, said, I don't believe that it prevents, that it speeds exercise recovery. I believe it prevents damage in the first place. And the way he described it is, on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run, which is a phrase you don't hear very often. Yeah, I've heard it once.
Maybe for me, 0.5, Chris. 0.5 miles. He's at his 50th removed. Yeah,
I've step heard it. It's a stepchild. So where strength and stability used to be a problem, they're no longer a problem, right? And he's talking about, hey, if I did 30 miles and it took me 11 days to recovery, to speed recovery would mean I'm recovered in 5 days, right? Instead of 11 or whatever that looks like. And we had actually, I'm doing a live with him today. And he sent me a message saying, listen, I did 30 miles today. Again, you don't hear that very often. And then he said, when I went to sleep, I was wrecked. When I got up to use the restroom in the middle of the night, I was a little less wrecked, but still wrecked. When I woke up, I was ready to train again. So to get to the example that I have is, imagine that mitochondrial stress is a stream of water impinging on dirt, right? And that's going to create a hole. And if you take a beaker of ESS60 to hold that, to be a buffer, that gives you this bandwidth to be able to hold more and not damage the dirt, right? But if you don't fix the stream, eventually it's going to fill up and damage the dirt. So you think about the stresses that you have throughout the day, where you're stressed mitochondria homeostasis. We believe that this holds on to those extra reactive oxygen species when you're stressing. And we can all agree that Anthony Kunkel is stressing his mitochondria, right? Probably every single mitochondria in his entire body. So it can hold on to that, preventing the damage. And then when he gets to homeostasis at some point, his body can recoup and pull all of that water out of the beaker. So now he's reset for another bout. And so I think hopefully that answered your question.
It didn't. The only thing I heard you say was take it 3 times a day. Got it. Okay, I know what to do now.
You should do comedy improv.
Yes, and no, but okay, that's phenomenal. I wanted to ask you though too, and I'm sure you hear this a lot. Okay, great, Chris. You know, you hear this a lot too, even like in the molecular hydrogen space, right? It's like, yeah, well, great that it works on rats. What about humans? What's your take on that? And I do think though, and maybe you can even elaborate a little bit, because I think on that mouse study, they were using P53 knockout mice, which I believe, I'm not a scientist, but I think that's like, those ones are like, they develop cancer the most rapid. They pretty much just go die. So they're the best ones that we can actually do studies on. But yeah, have there been human studies, or is that rat study, what can we extrapolate to say, no, we're seeing this in humans as well, or we could infer?
Well, first, the initial rat is a Wistar rat, which is, I think you're talking, I know Ian Mitchell did a study with P53, 53? I think
53, yeah.
No, 52. I think it's P52 knockout rats.
Okay.
They have the same gene knocked out, right? So what that looks like is a typical Wistar rat lives about 32 months and has a known amount of tumor mass in its body. So the longer it lives, the more tumor mass it has in its body. Even though the MyVital C rats lived out to 62 months, none of them had any tumors, right? And that's going to have significant protective effects, right? We're not here suggesting that humans are going to live 90% longer because of this. That has a lot to do with why those Wistar rats live longer. I did forget one piece, and let me jump into that right now. There's one particular marker that is often used associated with cancer and with cardiovascular disease, and it's HSCRP. HS stands for high sensitivity, CRP, C reactive protein. As that marker gets elevated in your bloodstream, that typically means you're inflamed. And we were actually talking about kind of inflammation before we got started and how important that is.
And heart disease and cancer are like the top 2 things you're going to die from, right? At this point, like, they're the top 2. So yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So you've got, so we had Dr. Young. I met him at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference last year. He met up with us at the Longevity Fest in Las Vegas. And he comes up, and I actually recorded him because this was profound. He said, Chris, I don't care if you're male, female, pre-surgery, post-surgery, cardiovascular disease, cancer, your product reduces HSCRP dramatically in 4 to 6 weeks. And he said, I had a client who was sitting at 9, and I'll tell you how scary 9 is in a second, but he was sitting at 9. What he was doing wasn't able to move it, got onto our product again 4 to 6 weeks later, down to 0.9. And 0.9 under 1 is normal range.
Wow.
I had conversations with an oncologist later who said that 9 typically means you have cancer until we prove otherwise, and also is a really high marker for cardiovascular disease. And so that drop is dramatic and is incredibly important. So that's one of the reasons that we think that we're having these. That's going to be the study. We're actually already doing an ad hoc study on HSCRP. So we're getting people signed up. We'll get HSCRP kit to them. We'll know their number. They'll get on the product for 6 weeks, and then we'll do it afterwards. Going back to, you were asking about human trials. My understanding is that we're the only ones who have even done an ad hoc trial, and that trial is a sleep study, right? Our most consistent testimonials related to sleep. I ended up in a conversation with Benjamin Smar. He's an assistant professor for the University of California, San Diego. I think he's still there. I haven't had contact with him in a while, but at the time he was a consultant for Oura Ring, right? One of the better sleep trackers on the market. What that meant is, if we could get people signed up into the program, he could get access to the back end of the data, and we could actually dig into this. That fell apart because it turns out the Oura Ring's pretty good at identifying COVID. And when this was pre-COVID, so as we're going into this, he just disappeared. He was on press tours. He was talking about it. Like he literally just disappeared. But we continued the study, and it's a survey study. And what the survey study is, it's a crossover study. So we collected 10 days of survey data before they ever tried the product. And the questions we were asking is, how hard was it to fall asleep? How restless was your sleep? How good did you feel in the morning? And then there was one more, restless. How quickly did you fall? How quickly did you fall asleep? There was one more, actually. I don't know where the chart is. But we had the basically assessing sleep quality, right? We collected 10 days of data before they tried the product, 10 days on the product, 10 days back off the product, and then 10 days back on the product. 100%. It's only 10 people. I know it's low. We're actually currently working. I want to get that to at least 25. 10 people, 100% of them reported improvements when they were on the product, right? So that, I think, is the only real pseudo study. And I'm very comfortable calling it a pseudo study. It's not published. It's not peer reviewed. But that is the data that we collected, and that data is available. Actually, maybe you should publish that. I haven't even really thought. Actually, I want 25 people through that. The next thing we're doing is, like I said, is the HSCRP, because that has such a profound difference. And then when you think about taking studies from rats to humans, I remember, so one of my initial quests, right, as I'm the chief scientist and we're bringing this to market, is how do you assess what percentage of things happen in rats that will happen in humans or won't happen in humans, right? And I ended up, actually my business partner whose office is on the other side of the wall from me, I heard him talking to a Dr. Paul Kudebek. He was out of the DePaul University, and Dr. Paul Kudebek takes rat studies into human studies regularly. And I kind of overheard this, and so I ran over there and was like, all right, Dr. Kudebek, what percentage of things happen in a rat that happen in a human? Like, you're in a unique position to answer this. And this is a little bit of a long story, but this was his response. Most people will say that what happens in a rat doesn't happen in a human, and they'll reference this particular study. It was a study on a morning sickness drug that they gave to rats. Everything was good. They started giving it to pregnant women to address morning sickness. And unfortunately, the fetuses were coming out deformed. And they'll like, see, what happens in a rat doesn't happen in a human. And then he goes on to say, but had they looked at the fetuses of the rats, they actually would have noticed the deformities, right? So this one kind of pivotal case that people will reference, what happens in a rat doesn't happen in a human, they actually looked at the wrong data. And there is a reason that every kind of organization looks at rat studies in terms of safety before you ever give it to a human, unless you're a biohacker, because we're crazy like that. And it doesn't involve the FDA. So there is most things that happen in rats happen in humans. That's why we have those trials. And it's not everything, right? They have different lifespans. Some things take longer to develop. There are absolute differences. But one of the things that I like to point out is, if you were to say what's more similar genetically, a rat, a mouse, or a human, most people will go mouse rat, right? Like, they're clearly more genetically related. We actually, as humans, share significantly more DNA with rats than rats do with mice, right? So our kind of intuition about genes and what is associative is not very good. So I think people need to be careful when they say that. But one day it would be very cool. And maybe with AI, we can figure this out. What is the exact percentage of things that happen in rats that do or don't happen in humans? I think that would be a fascinating number. But I think it's a lot higher than people want to accept.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and a lot of studies are done that way, and then we see a lot of anecdotal things in humans as well. So if you're getting the testimonials and it all adds up to me, and we've seen a lot in that space. I wanted to ask you, because there's a lot of controversy too. There's a lot of products out there on the market, right? And even when we were talking beforehand, someone might look at this award-winning molecule and say, "Oh, this is carbon 60." And you said, actually, there's a difference, and there's a reason why we call it ESS 60.
Yep.
And I wanted to ask you, how can we determine as consumers? I just want to be upfront. I have been in the biohacking space for about 10 plus years. I know a lot of carbon 60 products on the market. There's only one, yours and another guy I know, that are like top of the line. And that's just from reputation. That's just from 10 years of me being in the game and kind of knowing who's who and who's putting out good products. So I already knew about your product years ago as being reputable. But if not everybody knows that, and there's a lot of scammers out there and snake oil, how can people discern this? What's the best way? And by the way, I don't have any affiliate fees or anything with you. If you guys want to go out and get, Chris's product, check it out. Maybe we'll give them a code, but I don't need any returns or anything on that. I just want people to get the best product out there. So yeah, Chris, how do we know?
Yeah. So if you look back, remember our decision to get into the market was because of that paper where 50% of the supplements on the market don't have in them what they say they have in them, right? And we kind of knew that would happen in the C60 space. Unfortunately, it happened a lot faster than we ever thought it would. I'm very altruistic, and I think that that people are trying to do their best. They just don't know what they're doing. So I'll give you a good example. And let me just lay this out. We like to think of C60 as an industrial product, right? We still sell C60 to research institutions around the world to put into inks, batteries, tires, and photocells. C60, if it's processed improperly, is harmful. So you have to be careful in that space. ESS 60 is C60 that's been processed for people and pets. Like, that's how we like to think about it. We also like to think about it in terms of how do we stay safe, right? We tested 22 of the products on the market, and all of them except for one, and it's the guy you're mentioning, and I'll say it's Ian Mitchell. Like, he creates a great product. Everything except for his and ours was woefully low in concentration. And there are products out there that claim to have C60 in them that have zero C60. Like, there is no traceable part. Some of those actually put together a web page that does a really good job of proving that they have C60. But if you've worked with the molecule for 34 years, you read that research and understand he's proving he does not have C60 in his product. It's bad, but it's
Wow.
great science. It's not great science. It's crappy science that's well written for a consumer that cannot process that information, right? It's just too scientific. But I'm reading it going like, I almost believe it, and I know there's no C60 in it, and I'm a scientist, right? So that's a tough space. There is one group that are selling water-soluble C60. We may find out that water-soluble C60 is amazing down the road, but at this point, there are zero toxicity studies on water-soluble C60. It is a different molecule. It's like going into a lab, mixing something and saying, hey, we should put this on the market.
Wouldn't it make more sense to be fat soluble because your cells are made of fat? I don't know. That was just my intuition.
Well, you got two things, right? Because you have fat soluble vitamins, you have water soluble vitamins, right? We are more water based than fat based, and it's much easier for us to get to absorb water soluble things, right? Like that happens faster. And the reason we sell our product in olive oil or avocado oil or MCT oil is because if you took a pile and it's carbon, so it's a black powder, and it's going to be a crystalline powder, like sugar or salt would be crystals in your hand, you can consume that, right, as long as it's ESS 60, and because it's not water soluble, you would just excrete most of it, right? It's not very bioavailable. When you dissolve it in one of these oils, you actually break those crystals down and take it down to the monomolecular level, right? So each individual ESS60 molecule is now floating around instead of crystals, and those are significantly more bioavailable. By the way, fun fact, one drop of our olive oil product has more than 400 times as many of these molecules than you have cells in your body. So one drop has 400 times as many of these molecules than you have cells in your body, which is important because if we believe the boss theory and we're functioning at the mitochondrial level, there's between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body. We would like to saturate each of those mitochondria with one of these molecules so it can act as that buffer. And so that's good. Like that's where a teaspoon is probably the right amount. Actually, I've never done that calculation, but like for the amount of mitochondria that you have in your body, teaspoon probably fits right in. So we looked, and here's my altruistic view. When you first started manufacturing this, you manufactured it according to the study that, again, my lab provided the material. My lab is mentioned in that study. So you're actually going to the study that we were part of, and you take an Erlenmeyer flask, right? So that's kind of the triangular flask, and you got a magnetic stirrer, and you stir this ESS60 molecule for 2 weeks, right? That's the protocol that was in that study. And it's in olive oil, so it takes 2 weeks to get to saturation. What we found as we were making bigger and bigger vessels, right? So we're 10-liter, 100-liter vessels, is that it took longer. It took more mixing. So I believe we actually have the HPLC. We are actually a lab that's worked with this molecule for 34 years. We were testing it not once a day. We were testing it hourly to understand where where the concentration is at. And we found that you have to mix it for 3 weeks because the fluid dynamics are such that you don't get enough exposure to the powder in order to get it to dissolve. So if you're a company that doesn't have an HPLC and you're out there mixing it for 2 weeks, your product will be woefully low in concentration. Like that is my altruistic view. I do think that you should be more on top of it, but that's my altruistic view. And then one last thing, there's a company out there selling supercharged C60, which has no C60 in it, which is actually nano onions, right? So you can imagine this soccer ball shaped ESS60 molecule, but you have multiples, right? So like an onion, so you got all these layers, and then you chop it in half. That molecule is very different than this one, right? This one has no dangling bonds. The one you chop in half has dangling bonds. We know, actually, again, we've been in this industry for so long. We know that one of our kind of research associates, Philippe Chabante, was putting this large quantities of these nano onions in motor oil and selling the motor oil. And then there's somebody out there who's actually selling that product. These are things that should not be happening. I know a lot of people are excited about Robert F. Kennedy coming in and loosening things, but I'm not sure, like we're already in a situation where some things need to be tightened down. And frankly, I would just say the morals of people need to be tightened down. Like you just shouldn't sell something. Those nano onions have 0 toxicity studies, 0. Like, so you just shouldn't put this on the market. You should do those base studies. They're not cheap, but they're not crazy expensive to do these base studies. And if you want to bring a product to market, and maybe you even have the marketing clout to do it, you actually should do the fundamental toxicity studies before you bring this product to market.
Yeah, so critical. Thanks for breaking that down. I mean, just to hear the care in the product, taking 3 weeks to make like a bottle of this stuff. It's like, man, guys, like think about just what goes into making it. I mean, very different,
I like to say, if you were to wake up, I'll start with this. So I'm just a very different supplement guy. I think people typically get into the supplement industry one of 2 ways. The first way is they decide to make a lot of money and they decide they're going to do it with supplements. And I have no problem with people making a lot of money. That's just not how I ended up here. The other is they have their own health challenges, right? Or the health challenges of a loved one, and they figure out the protocol and whatever the supplement. And now they want to save the world. Hopefully it doesn't surprise you. I am not against people saving the world. It's just not how I ended up here. I've been manufacturing this wacky ESS60 molecule since 1991. My lab puts it in a study that's supposed to be a toxicity study. The rats, crazy rats, live 90% longer. And now I'm just trying to be a good shepherd to that research, and then also to the industry, which I now have grown to love. I love this health space. And, I've got a podcast as well. You get a joy every time you're talking to people. Well, not all of them, but most of them. Most of them. I can't say that I haven't enjoyed anything. Some have been harder than others. And I've, written a book, and I'm working on another book. Like, this is an exciting space to be in. But I ended up here, very, very serendipitously.
That's usually how it happens. I've always noticed that some of the great people here, it's usually always not, they were called to do it. They didn't know what they were even doing. It just serendipitously happened. And I think energy will do that for you. I wanted to ask you, so then are you taking this, you mentioned your family, your team, everyone's taking it, your wife. So what's like a daily thing is this part of the stack that you take this twice a day, like morning and evening? Is that kind of a recommended dosing?
I can share with you. Our recommended dose is 1 teaspoon or 5 mils, right? Same amount. My routine looks like this. So I do kind of a bulletproof coffee thing with MCT, but I use our MCT, which, by the way, this is kind of cool. You take that black powder. MCT is a clear liquid, basically. You pour that black powder in a clear liquid, and it turns a beautiful purple color, right? Like, it's just gorgeous. Wow. So I take our purple MCT into my coffee, and while that's mixing, right, you want to emulsify that. I take and that's about 1.5 teaspoons of the MCT. Then I take about 1.5 teaspoons of our olive oil product. And if I have a longer day, right, or if I'm, back-to-back podcasts or whatever, I'll take another shot, right? It's definitely good for that. But the typical person will take 1 teaspoon per day. Sometimes people ask, like, hey, what do you notice? Like, how quickly can you notice? It can be subtle. Actually, I just had this long email thread of a guy saying, yeah, and he was a doctor, and he was like, he did the Anthony Kunkel thing. He did the biohacker thing. He like increased the dose. He was taking a lot of it. So he's going through it really quickly, and he didn't really notice anything. And he actually had to watch somebody else take a video and talk about kind of the slow progression and the benefits that he was getting kind of long term. And then he was like, I need to find this video for you, because you need to be sharing this video, because it could probably reduce the churn in your business. So we get people who will say they haven't noticed anything, and then we'll drop off the product, and then they're like, oh, okay, now I get it, right? Like, now I notice what I'm missing and get back on it.
Yeah.
We have one testimonial from a lady who she sent her video, and she took the first product that morning, and then in the evening she recorded the video, and she said, today I didn't finish my cup of coffee, right? If you're a coffee drinker, that's a big deal, right? So that, and then I have a longer one that is it's kind of interesting, because it includes the worst testimonial about a supplement that you'll ever hear. So Gwen, she's a big distributor here in Houston, our largest distributor here in Houston. And she originally ordered the product for her dog. She had no intention of taking it, but she noticed such a profound difference in her dog. She decided that she wanted to take the product. Now, I like to pause there because, this is a new product, right? I'm a guy who's sharing research. I really am not that motivated, but I do make a living off of this. So you should, everything I'm saying, you should be taking with a grain of salt. And one of the grains of salt, and maybe a big old grain of salt, should be placebo effect, right? That's what I like about pets. There is no placebo effect on pets, right?
Yep.
Ironically, they're not smart enough to go, oh, I got my dropper today, and so I'm going to have more energy today, right? The pet just acts the way it feels. So she starts taking it. I did an interview with her, and on the video, she said, if you had asked me at the 3-month mark, have I noticed anything? I would have initially said no, that I hadn't noticed anything. But I slowed down. I took stock of my life. I was working later. I was waking up earlier. I was never a morning person. And then here's the worst testimonial about a supplement ever. I cleaned my garage. It's not in any marketing literature, but that also means something, right? It's either the effort in going into it, or maybe there's some emotional baggage. We actually have kind of emotional balance testimonials. I'll share that one in a second. But there's something about addressing that big project. The one that's kind of emotional kind of balance is, I got this testimonial from a lady out of the UK. Her video arrives. I'm watching the video. This is going to be great, right? And she says, all right, I'm in the middle of quitting smoking. That's how she starts her video. I'm like, if I had known you were quitting smoking, I wouldn't have sent the product yet. Like, because, if my parents quit smoking a number of times throughout their life, uh, and they were not pleasant people when they were quitting smoking, right? Like, this
Yeah.
is not a great time. But she went on to give a really good testimonial. And one of the things that really stuck with me is she said, I find that I have a longer fuse with my son, right? She had a toddler. And if you've ever been a parent, there is a fuse, and sometimes it's longer and sometimes it's shorter. And to have a fuse that is longer, that you recognize as longer, is really really impressive, and could tie back to sleep, right? Again, if you've got 2 million mitochondria in your brain cells, and this is helping reduce the negative oxidative effect of reactive oxygen species in those mitochondria, you would imagine that you would have these positive results.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's huge. I love the wide variety of testimonials from the emotional health. I mean, it's all connected. I always tell people there's no such thing as work-life balance, or, like you said, whether it's your sleep or your overweight and inflammation in that way, it's all bleeding in. So it's all connected. So really, really good stuff. I wanted to ask you, I know we're getting close to the end of the hour here. I have a ton of questions to ask you. I'm gonna have to bring you back for round 2 if you're okay with that, because we'll have to talk more.
I'll tell you what, I can send you some product, and maybe we schedule 45 days out, and you can share with everyone what it's like to live twice as long in 45 days.
Chris, that'd be great, because I'm gonna tell you one thing. I'm like your running example guy. Like, I take a ton of different supplements and try a lot of things. I don't feel crap on these supplements most of the time, right? So for me, we'll have to talk about this. I'm gonna have to really take inventory. Like, where am I at? What is going on? Sleep is actually something I'm dealing with. Part of it, I think, is just structurally my nose and stuff, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about that, but so that would be interesting to see about, for me, sleep. And for me, I think it's going to be more subtle, but I would, even like you said, emotional reaction, reacting to my kids and things like that. So I know there'll be markers for me to look at and take stock of inventory of my life and say, hey, what is changing? What is different? But, and so, yeah, I think that would be interesting. And I think even for me, maybe getting some of the data prior, like the CRP, right? And then saying what happens, 90 days from now, or 45 days, right? Something like that. Well, a couple more questions I want to ask you, and then let's wrap things up. One, exciting projects you're working on, because you just mentioned you've got a book, or you've got another book coming on. Anything you can just kind of tell us, that exciting projects that either you're working on or the team at MyVital C are working on, that we can expect here in the near future?
Yeah, well, I did do a longevity summit, right? So it's called Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms. And I did that with a company, and now we're kind of putting it onto our own platform. So we'll be able to get that out to more people. I interviewed 55 experts in longevity, including like Ben Greenfield, Stephen Gundry, Dave Asprey. So it was a pretty, is another thing. If you had said, hey, Chris, I need you to interview 55 people. In fact, the company did say, they actually said, we need you to interview like 35 people. And I thought in my head, I might be able to get 25. Hopefully they won't be that angry. But the end result was 55 people. If you had told me that up front, I would have said, let's not do this project, because I don't know how I'm going to get Gundry, Greenfield, and Asprey. And I don't know how I'm going to interview 55 people. And, I hadn't really interviewed anybody at that point. And so that's about to come out. I'm really excited about that. The new book is really kind of digging a little bit deeper into the ESS60 space and its value, and doing more education for people. And then we're going to conferences. I don't know if you end up going to conferences. We're going to the Health Optimization in Austin, and then we're also going to Dave Asprey's Biohacking Conference in Austin. So it's great to get out there and connect with people. And like that HSCRP study, we wouldn't have that information if I didn't meet Dr. Young at one event and then him show up at another event. By the way, he's next to impossible to get a hold of, right? I'm like, hey, can you share the data? And he's like, absolutely. Ghost, right? And then I finally got him. He responded like, I feel so bad. I was like, I don't need you to feel bad. Just send me the data. Yeah. Like you feeling bad.
You don't have to even talk to me. Just send me an email.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that, because the ramifications of reducing HSCRP are dramatic, right? Like it really will shift where we're going to invest dollars. We're constantly investing dollars in research, which is not normal for a lot of supplement companies out there. So yeah, those are the things that I'm excited about.
So cool. So cool. Excited to hear about that. Man, I got a lot, like I said, I got a lot more questions to ask you, but let's wrap things up. Last but not least, Chris Burres, where can people connect either with you or your team at MyVital C? What's the best place to go? I know obviously the website, share that with us, but are you guys on Instagram and social media? What other stuff are you guys doing?
I'll make a URL for your audience. Should that be Joel Evans as the URL at the end, or what would you like it to be?
Yeah, Joel Evan. You could do that, or Joel 10, or whatever you want to do. Whatever, make it
Joel. Okay, yeah, we can do Joel 15. That works.
Yeah, well,
it's not. So myvitalc.com/Joel15, because it's going to be a $15 coupon. When you get to that page, that coupon's going to be on that page. So make sure you go to myvitalc, C as in carbon.com/Joel15. When you land there, just a couple of things. We do sell 3 products: olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT oil. People ask, which one do I recommend? We always recommend the olive oil first for 2 reasons. The first is we're a research-based organization, and all of the research is on, basically all of it, is on olive oil with the ESS60 molecule. So that's the first reason. The second reason is you get the highest concentration in olive oil, right? So you get the highest concentration of the ESS60 molecule in olive oil. It's about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in olive oil, 0.6 in avocado oil, and then 0.3 in MCT oil. Those are the 2 things that we recommend. The next thing that I'll share is the book, Live Longer and Better, is available. You can go to livelongerandbetterbook.com. It's available on Amazon, but we do run a really cool charity piece. So go to that link, myvitalc.com/Joel15, and then use the menu structure to find the book. It's the same price on Amazon and on our website. But on our website, you can order a signed version for $10 extra. So I'll sign it for you. Yes. And that full $10 goes to Operation Underground Railroad. So I don't know if you remember the movie The Sound of Freedom, right? Addressing childhood sex trafficking. I happened to see him speak the week his movie came out. And then it's an organization, like it's hard to imagine something more important to stop entirely. Yeah. So the full signature fee goes directly to Operation Underground Railroad. So happy for people to take advantage of that. Also, we have a 25% discount if you go on subscription. Even if you're going to try it once, go on subscription. Our customer service team has 1,000 5-star reviews on Google, right? They're amazing. And they are not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. So take advantage of that. Most people stay on it, but take advantage of that and enjoy that discount.
Yeah. Awesome stuff, Chris. Really appreciate it. It sounds like too, if anybody's doing this, just from all the anecdotes too, you've told us, it'd be wise to probably go 3 months at least anyways, and then take an intake of where you're at. Some people obviously get amazing results right away, but for some it might take, if you got some dirty mitochondria, we might take some time to clean you up a little bit. So I'd probably recommend everybody go at least 3 months. Chris Burres from MyVital C, brother, thanks for being on the show. Can't wait to see you again.
Joel, thank you so much for having me.